want to call it that, where the state only requires a TIA for 3,000 or more trips generated or projected to be generated in a single day for a development. So looking at the text, the proposed text that's before you modifies a small section of the subdivision code that basically just states the TIA is required. And then the bulk of the language requirements, et cetera, are added to the TIA section of the zoning code 154.116, and the subdivision code was 153.009. And those are both in your packets as attachment A and C. Just to summarize, I'll go through it in detail if you have specific questions, but the proposed language includes the number of projected trips that would trigger a TIA, submission guidelines, and required information that has to be included in the report provided to staff. And specifically, one thing the planning board asked for was a conversion factor for truck and tractor trailer traffic. And then we also include language on guidance on improvements, if road levels of service are projected to decrease because of a development's expected traffic. As written, this ordinance will apply to all development types. So it doesn't matter if it's a major subdivision, a special use permit for multifamily, or even just a change of use of a site. If a development change of use or any one of those is projected to add this number of trips, again, 75 or more in a peak hour or 750 or more per day, a TIA would be required to be submitted to staff. And then anytime a TIA is submitted to a local government, NCDOT is also brought to the table. The projected vehicle count is going to be determined, and as it's written in the language currently, using the most recent edition of the Trip Generation Manual, which is published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And this is the national standard that you see referenced basically in every other local jurisdiction's ordinance that I highlighted earlier. The Institute of Transportation Engineers conducts real world studies and data that basically they feed into these formulas to come up with these projected vehicle trips for specific types of development and uses of land. So that's what we've included right now. I heard one question when we set the public hearing on September 8th about the possible cost of generating something like this. The approximate cost, and again, this is quite a bit of a range, but would be $100 to $500 for an engineer to basically go in, enter some minor calculations concerning the use of land and the type of development, and basically putting the numbers that come out on letterhead. That's approximately what would be charged. And then town staff is also planning to keep basically a staff table to reference against that, to just make sure numbers are accurate. Also based on the Trip Generation Manual. That draft version of the staff table is included as attachment C. And again, that's just the attachment's meant to provide examples of the types and size of developments that would trigger this requirement. So a couple I'll just highlight briefly are for single family detached housing. So for a traditional subdivision, 70 dwelling units would be the trigger threshold, and not because it generates more daily traffic, but because it trips the PM peak hour traffic of 75 trips in a peak hour. That's just one example, and I can go through more of them if you wish. So again, as I mentioned, the planning board considered this at the August 2nd meeting. They voted to recommend approval. They found it consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the specific objectives and policies they found it to be consistent with is included in your packet as attachment D. And again, town council's options. This is just the first time we're reading this, so would be to approve with modifications. I'm welcome to any feedback and revising this and bring it back to council, tabling it or denying the text amendment. And again, if we do move to adoption, just remember that we would have to adopt a statement of consistency as part of approval. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff? I got one. So if we had a situation, kind of like we do in Mills River Crossing with multiple entry points, actually off of different roads. Will we take that in consideration as still the total package of that subdivision? Probably.
It'd be
If it stays named the same.
Yeah,
You see where I'm going with?
yeah, obviously on a case by case basis, but yes, it would be the entire development. So, if we were to use the Mills River Crossing example, and if there was an additional phase that triggered this threshold, it would qualify, trigger the threshold, and a TIA would be needed.
Currently, Michael, in our ordinance, is there a TIA requirement for commercial development?
No,
No.
No.
And the requirement for residential development would just be more than 10 lots,
yeah, I think it's 11 or more.
11 or more, I'm sorry.
Michael, help me out with that engineered book. What's the name of that?
Yeah, the trip generation manual.
Yeah. So do we need to purchase one of those, or is that something that's accessed just by online or?
So it can be purchased, but I consulted with our resident traffic engineer, Mr. Jeffrey Moore, on the planning board, and he actually recommended against that. So it's more of an engineer's tool. And so it's not, I may have misspoken last time. It's not like the example we have in attachment C where you can go down a table and find it. There are variables and factors related to the development and the use that would need to be put in that. And so Mr. Moore is recommending the town not purchase it. What he is recommending, and what would be an alternative, again, if we want to put the onus on the town to come up with the number, is that Mr. Moore is the individual that helped develop this table with me. And basically we would develop a comprehensive table that would cover the majority of the town's use types.
Okay.
So staff would have something to reference without having to go into the in-depth engineering and putting stuff into formulas in the trip generation manual.
And Michael, you see that as just like a quick guide chart that Jeff might help you come up with
That's
to
correct.
go down the line, and you can check it off in a matter of minutes. or
That's correct.
seconds.
It would be a tool staff uses to double check. Really for the exact number, that's where an engineer would be required.
But you would probably just require them to get an engineer if it was kind of borderline to the. upper
Yeah,
limits.
and that's something, we discussed kind of offline adding, is that, there's a possibility we could add language that if the number is within 5% or 10%, whatever council would be comfortable with, that an engineer's letter would be required to verify that. But yeah, this is a tool, and, we also discussed including a table like this as an appendix to the ordinance, so it would be publicly available. But another thing Mr. Moore brought up is that because the trip generation manual from the Institute of Traffic Engineers uses real world data, it's updated every 3 years. And so ours would would not be updated unless we basically, and that's something we can do. We could hire, and we have a contracted engineer we use for watershed stormwater reviews. We can also use those on-call services for them to check the updated trip generation manual and update any numbers that are out of date.
And just for the public that might be watching in or anybody else, these would be used if they exceeded these numbers, might create the developer to have to put in a turn lane or something of that nature in the process. Is that what this is for?
It's possible. The only thing, if you trip one of these thresholds that's required, is that a full traffic impact analysis be put together by a North Carolina licensed engineer, and again, done in concert with the town and NCDOT. If the result of that full report, which can be 20 to 50 pages, is that levels of service decrease on the roads, which has to relate with traffic wait time. So, if there's enough additional traffic, that wait times at a specific intersection fall, to an unacceptable grade, then the town, and that's some of the language that's included. On line 70 in section D, improvements required, where the town now actually would have the authority to say, hey, your TIA says this road's service level is decreasing and we are going to require you to make improvements, whether it be a turn lane or deceleration lane is all situationally dependent.
How will this come into play if there's already a development or business on a road and then another development or business on a road comes in beside them and generates traffic, but neither one of them specifically meet this, but both of them together exceed this?
They would not be required to submit a TIA. If each development and each private property is not generating above these thresholds, nothing would be required of them.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Mr. Malachek, if you help walk me through the process, because it's not really in the text, and this is just sort of beating the same drum that I was hammering on when you first brought this to our attention, was that the permitting process or application process, should I say, I guess still you would direct the applicant whether or not they need to pursue services of an engineer. That I assume that's what the trigger threshold table, whether it's part of the ordinance or whether it's just used internally, but that would still, it wouldn't automatically default to any, as the proposed language says, that any expansion or new development would automatically require this. I guess there's a, or help me understand, if I make application for, I want to add a square footage to my retail business and I come to town for a permit, when is the onus on me to go ahead and furnish a letter from an engineer saying it doesn't create or doesn't trigger the need for a TIA, or does the staff do that?
So staff would have, let's just call it this cheat sheet, the table, again, in a more expanded version than what's before you now to check. But at the end of the day, the onus would be on the applicant because, you know, if this would be adopted, it's a requirement in our regulation. But again, staff is there to double check that.
I might just offer a point of clarification. I think what Mr. Malachek had just said, I'm going to say it a different way. If we look at the cheat sheet and someone is adding or going to build 20 homes, if we look at that first line, single family detached, the trigger is 70 units. So if someone comes to the door with a 20 unit application, we'll look at that and say, you don't meet the threshold, so you don't need to go get an engineer. You clearly fall below it. It's when they come with 70 or 71 that we say, according to our data, we're going to have to do a traffic impact analysis. And that's the purpose of this cheat sheet.
Okay, well, as long as understand any new, or as it's spelled out in this proposed language, you know, any expansion or redevelopment, new construction, so on and so forth is subject to it, but that's only after its staff identifies that they have to, that it's not a default, that any new permit has to come in with a letter from an engineer saying that it does that's below the threshold.
And I'll just add to that typically with larger projects that you would think of that would require a TIA, there's almost always a pre-application meeting. In some instances, it's actually required. And that at that time is where Mike would look at the proposed development, look at the schedule and say, by the way, you need to be thinking of this, or you fall below it.
It's almost similar to how the watershed regulations are implemented currently. Usually that's something I have to check for each site and tell the applicant what the percent impervious threshold or limitations are. This is a different topic, but it's the same approach. And the town manager is correct. for residential, it's on a dwelling unit basis. And even when the traffic manual, the trip generation manual is updated, there's the possibility these numbers can shift, but they're not going to shift drastically. It's just going to be updated based on the most recent data and studies the Institute of Engineers has done. But yeah, commercial developments are done on a square footage basis. So, I mean, as an example, if we have a manufacturing facility that's, you know, currently at 50,000 and wants to add 25,000 square feet, putting them at 75,000 square feet, which would be above the threshold, that would be something that I would flag and say, hey, you're passing this threshold. Can you at least put together an engineer's letter confirming what your projected vehicle trip count would be? And then if the engineer's letter also confirms the same, that's when a TIA would be required.
And you foresee the sheet that you would be looking at, Michael, that would be expanded over the one that we currently have here in front of us in our packet.
That's correct. We would want it to cover the majority of the uses that we permit
Yeah.
on the.
So what if somebody comes and your sheet doesn't have one of their uses on it? What do you do at that point?
I would either contact our contracted engineer to ask for his opinion. I could also contact Mr. Jeffrey Moore on the planning board, who's a traffic engineer, for his opinion. And I could also, you know, ask the applicant if they were able to acquire the information as well. So there would be multiple channels.
Any more questions? Hearing none right now, is there any interested parties that wish to present anything to us about this matter? Hearing none. So now I'll ask for public comment. If anybody wants to give public comment on this matter, we'll limit 3 minutes if anybody wants to have any public comment on that. Hearing none. All right, additional questions, decision? If we don't have any questions, I'd take a motion to, but in that motion, we'll need to make it, consistent. A consistent statement of consistency with the motion.
Mr. Mayor, you need to close the public hearing first before you go that step.
Any more questions before we close? I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make the motion, we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Randy. Second,
I'll second that motion.
any discussion on it before we close it? No? All in favor?
Uh,
So now we're back in regular. Now I entertain a motion with a statement of consistency.
So do you want to vote on whether we approve this text amendment? And the statement of consistency is on the back end of that. That's the way I vote.
Any preference on that, Patty? As to how we,
Go ahead.
with the motion?
You can adopt them together or separate or both.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the text amendment 2201 traffic analysis, traffic impact analysis requirements. And that it is in consistency with the comprehensive plan.
That suits
Is that
staff, how
close
it's
enough?
worded, or need anything else?
If you could just clarify that you're also adopting the draft statement of consistency that staff's provided.
Yes. I've got me covered over.
I got a motion, a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ted. Any discussion? Hearing none.
I would like to thank the planning board for all the work they did on this because I did watch those meetings and it answered a lot of my questions.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, now we're looking at B, public hearing for economic development.
I think we should for clarification. Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind on that last item. There were a couple of ordinances attached in your packet. We can have a motion to adopt those as well. Specific to the traffic impact analysis.
A motion to adopt ordinance 2022-16.
And George, ready to add it in there? I don't.
So what are you saying, Daniel, is the text that we have in the blue writing in front of us there?
That's the actual language of the text, but the ordinance actually modifying the town's code is what we left out.
How you want it worded? You want me to amend it? Or do you want? Just to
I think just to do it separately would be cleanest at this point. That's ordinance 22-16.
make a motion that we adopt what's the word I need?
Ordinance 22-16.
22-16.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Bridget's turn right here in just a second. I get my stuff sorted out.
Mr. Ray, while you're doing that, I'll just give a quick reminder. We spoke with Mrs. Brady last month about Project Chicago. This is a potential economic development project in town that would invest $10 million in the community. And they have requested incentives. And I'm going to hand them over to Brittany to give you the rundown on those and answer any questions.
So Project Chicago is a confidential existing industry located currently in Western North Carolina that's considering a second location in Henderson County and in the town of Mills River. The company has a global footprint and has considered real estate options within and outside of Henderson County. The opportunity would allow for investment into new machinery and equipment to increase their overall production by adding a second production line. The company falls into one of the county's target industry sectors, which is the transportation component sector. The project is considering real estate expansion opportunities within Henderson County. If the project is approved, then the company would make a $10 million investment, $1 million in real property and $9 million in business personal property over 5 years. The project would create 54 new positions with an average wage of $58,000, which exceeds the county average wage. So again, it's a $10 million over 5 years, 54 new positions and payroll and wages at $58,000 a year in average, based on a 7-year straight line depreciation of business personal property at the 25% residual and 70% threshold. The town of Mills River would look at an incentive of $2,880 in year one, and the life of the incentive would be $29,057.14. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Brittany? Brittany, who, like on these job numbers, who keeps up with that? Do they just file a report with y'all? Is that what
They do. So companies would enter if incentives are improved, that allows the company to enter an incentive negotiation and an agreement with the county and the town at the end of each year based on what they have told us they would invest. They're required to submit their NCUI 101 payroll reporting form. And that's a consistent reporting form that they already send that to the state. We have a portal And so Daniel's able to go into that portal, look at those documents. We confirm that they have paid their taxes. And then we also require an asset listing each year to make sure that they're up to date on their investments.
Mr. Mayor, before we continue, I apologize. We need to go into a public hearing to continue this conversation.
Very much. All right, somebody, I guess, go into public hearing about the second local development. Project Chicago. Thank you. Second,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
I need to repeat anything now that we're in public hearing.
I
Okay.
think we're good on that. Any more questions for Brittany? I'm sure some of you's got some that she may or may not can answer.
I guess my question is just tangentially related to the Project
Mhm.
Chicago, and that is, do industries ever parse out salary versus hourly? You know, because I understand when they say the average salary
Mhm.
or pay is $58,000 a year, but that's from everybody from the, the site manager all the way down to the custodial staff. And I just wonder, is there ever differentiation between hourly and salary or?
No, so what we historically ask companies to do is when they present the payroll reporting form, it has every employee and all their personal information. They redact that information. And so all that we see here locally, as well as the state, is those salaries. And then we go through and just make the average across the board. So manufacturing, again, as a whole, that wage is much higher than the average wage you see across the county. But that includes all the positions from the CEO to the entry level positions.
Thank
you. You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, any public comment pertaining to this? No. I guess we need to close our public. I'd like to motion. Thank you. Second,
Second.
thank you, Sandy. All in favor? Okay, we need a motion if we're going to accept this economic development incentive for this company in a second. If we all want to do it, any other discussion about it between us?
Mayor Gantz, I would like to make a motion that the Mills River Town offer up a incentive to Project Chicago, $29,057.14.
Okay, and that's over the duration of the incentive process, okay? Second,
I'll second it.
any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, Britt.
Thanks, Brittany.
Moving on. Consideration of policy, fee waiver.
Mr. Mayor, it's been the town's practice to receive requests from certain organizations within the town and bring it to this council for consideration of fee waivers. This year with the United Methodist Church coming to the town in April, there was discussion, questions about the potential of preparing a policy that would authorize staff to waive those fees. And so that's what we have in front of you. So I'm going to hand over to Nicole Sweat, Parks and Recreation Director, to run through the report as well as the policy and answer any questions you might have.
Sure. Yeah. So as Daniel mentioned, at the April 28th council meeting, Mills River Planning Park came. Council asked staff to prepare a policy that would kind of give some guidance to future fee waivers. So staff reviewed with a lot of other municipalities, fee waiver policies, see what they do. And we brought it to our Parks Advisory Board committee for their feedback. And so this draft is what came out of that work. So just as a general guideline, so this policy establishes parameters for, waiving use fees for special events or activities of town-owned facilities. The town is occasionally approached to waive the fees, facility use fees for activities. These guidelines are designed to provide an equitable means for the event organizer to apply for a fee waiver and to establish mutually beneficial partnerships between the town and the community. Without going through and reading all this, but basically what we wanted to do is really make it clear to anyone that comes and asks that it's not just my or the town manager's whim of who it is, that you really have to meet a certain criteria to be able to get your fee waived. So just as a guideline, so first we wanted to show who we would not waive fees for. And so that would be any events sponsored by private individuals, essentially that are not open to the public, activities that are primarily for fundraising or charitable natures unless funds are directly benefit the town or a partnership that has been established by the town. Events or activities that, again, are not open to the general public, events that are political in nature or by individuals seeking political office or elected officials for the purpose of an election campaign, religious organizations seeking space or facilities for religious services or organized that are based outside of the town of Mills River, that can't demonstrate that, there might be groups that aren't housed here, but they benefit the community. We just want to make sure that any organization we would waive a fee for, that they're here to do good things for the community, benefit the community. And then any projects or organizations who have failed to fulfill their obligations during other events. So if they have not behaved well here in the past, that they will not be allowed to ask for a fee waiver in the future. So what would be eligible? So the event would need to be, a community-wide event, something that's open to the entire public at no charge, that there would be no charge or fee. It must be family friendly, be appropriate to the park setting, offer activities or events associated with the town's mission statement and core values, and of course, in turn, the department's core mission statement and values, and be offered by a nonprofit or not-for-profit establishment organization. So with that, it goes through of, what they would have to do. And the big thing is they would also, if we do waive the fee, that does not mean we waive any other rule. So they would still have to follow, they would still be required to file an insurance certificate with us, just like they do now. If they wanted to have a food truck and needed a permit for that, that fee would not be waived. This is strictly for that special event facility use fee we're discussing. So with that, I will take questions, feedback, and
How many of these you run across a year?
I would say I get requests somewhat regularly when I tell them that it's not for everybody. The only one I've ever received that would meet this criteria is for Party in the Park. So should do that one.
Any other questions?
If you say no, do they still have an option to come and ask council?
They currently do not. That's certainly something we could add into the policy.
A little counterintuitive to what we were trying to accomplish, though.
Right. I mean, I would just caution that you will have people that I say, no, you don't meet this criteria, that then you'll still get people to come. So.
I took that back out of my mouth.
Any other questions? Hearing none, do we hear a motion? You need a motion to adopt this, correct?
That's right.
What you thinking, Jeff?
Well, I'm supportive of it, and I'd like to authorize the staff to make this determination, and I like the way the policy's been drafted up. So therefore, I move that we adopt the facility and event fee waiver policy and guidelines as presented.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
thank you. All in favor? Hey, moving on to the consideration of policy for facility naming.
So, Mr. Mayor, as everyone's aware, we are currently constructing a new shelter. And internally, we've been referring to it as one thing, the public is referring it to another thing. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to put something in writing that will guide this council, this staff, future council, and how to name new facilities, rename existing facilities. So again, I'm going to hand it off to Nicole and run through the details of it.
Sure, yeah, we can have good. So this actually came from our Parks Advisory Board. We were discussing the creation of the new shelter, as well as talking about the Banner Farm Road property, and they were kind of like, well, how do we name that? What do we do? And when we said there was really no guidelines, that's when they asked me to draft this policy. So they have, again, I went to other organizations to see what their policies were like. I've kind of drafted from them and brought it back to the Parks Advisory Committee, and through that, this policy is what you have. So just the purpose of this policy is to establish a consistent approach for the naming of town of Mills River facilities. So when considering the proposal to name or rename a town facility, the proposed name should be based on one of or more of the following criteria. It should describe the function of the facility or assist the public in identifying the facility's intended use. Recognize a distinct geographic location, natural or geological feature, or local point of reference. Commemorate places or events that are of lasting importance to the town, region, state, or nation. And recognize an individual, group, or organization that contributed significantly to the acquisition, development, or operation of the facility and or the features within the facility. So existing names shall not be subject to change unless after investigation and review that the proposed name is found to be more appropriate than the existing name based on the criteria. So to meet that criteria, a name should have a strong positive image and stand the test of time, have broad public support and not be divisive, must not result in undue commercialization of the facility if it accompanies corporate gift or sponsorship. Avoid recognizing an individual, group, or organization that has already been appropriately recognized by another town facility, and avoid names that are similar to other named facilities and places in the community just to reduce confusion. So the bottom line is the duration of a name. Once you have a name for something, you have to have a really, really good reason to ever change the name. Ideally, you would never change the name of the facility unless it went under major renovation, repurposed a facility, that sort of thing. And then ultimately the process. So for any, we would allow the public, I don't know if anyone's followed the Henderson County School Board. They had a big thing. They wanted to rename the auditorium at Hendersonville High School for one of the former teachers there. And there was a big outcry support that the public went to the board and requested. So we just wanted to, thinking that that could potentially happen one day, outline some of those policies. But ultimately to name a facility, someone would have to submit to us a request that had the facility or feature to be named, the proposed name, the reason for the proposed name, and how the proposed name is consistent with this policy, evidence of community support for the proposed name, and evidence that if it's named after an individual or organization that they would support that. But ultimately, for anything we are naming internally, or we have decided a town name or a name for the facility to be needed, anything that would be park specific, we would get recommendations from the Parks Advisory Board. Any other town, like say we build a new town hall, or one day it's a police department and it needs a name, anything not park related would go to the planning board. So through that recommendation, those committees would basically recommend to council, who would have the ultimate authority to name or not name the facility that would be official through a resolution. And just as a fun fact, Mills River Park was never actually officially named. It just one of those things that people, it was the first park in Mills River, they called it Mills River Park, and here we are calling it Mills River Park. So that's just what we're trying to avoid. It's like with the Banner Farm property is, do we want that to be called Banner Farm Park? Because that's the direction, because that's what people refer to it as right now.
Gotcha.
So that's it. I'll take questions, comments.
No, you just got some. Do we have any names in the making already that we know of, or?
For the picnic shelter, I know, I'm just speaking for my Parks Advisory Board, some of the names that they threw around were just things that would be like a geographical reference, or like things like a tree. So like just for the shelter, because for us, for a shelter, it's very minor, but for us, it's important to know, like you might say pick trees, that all our shelters have tree names. So you might have a maple shelter and a sycamore shelter, or, something along those lines. As for the Banner Farm, during our master plan process, we called it the Banner Farm Road Park. In some of the initial engineering drawings, I think it's been referred to as the Brandy Branch Park. So we've had multiple things floating around, but none that anybody is tied to.
So Nicole, I'm glad you hit on that, like a tree name for I don't have a problem with this, but I do have a problem naming it after a person. Facilities after people, because I just think that brings, because everybody in the community is not gonna be on board with that particular person, whoever it might be. And I feel like that's just gonna bring undue drama and conflict to this body. And this is just me talking. So, I would be all about doing it if it was named after a tree, a fish, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, we can
Point.
certainly remove that, that option. That is typically, used when, again, somebody donates a large amount of money.
Now, if somebody wants to come and put $1 million down, give it to the
Right.
town, we'll name the.
So,
small
and that's,
building.
and Daniel and I talked a little bit about this, and maybe if we want to remove it from our policy naming, I think that's fine. If we've talked about, we don't have a policy either, and not that it's ever come up, but if someone knocks on our door and says, knock, knock, Nicole, I have $1 million for you to go finish that park over there, that would be a corporate sponsor policy. So we can certainly remove naming of businesses and individuals completely from this policy. And then in the future, look at a corporate sponsorship policy.
I'm just one of 5 sitting here,
So-
so that's just my opinion. Mr.
Do
Mayor.
we not already have a, area that money was raised and donated in honor of a person?
The only thing, and I don't think it is an official name, the basketball court, what that money was donated, for Tommy Bryson.
Right.
And so we do have a plaque out there, that says, but I don't think that we've never had an official name that says that's the Thomas Bryson Memorial Basketball Court or anything like that. But again, that's where this policy, we could petition and have an official name and put a sign out there.
Well, I think when, families or groups have gone together and done something like that and donated, that it would be nice to maybe make it a permanent honor to the family or the memory of.
Any more questions, discussion?
Well, I guess I'd ask the park director just to help walk me through this. So if we adopted policy as it's presented, is it a proactive process that then we have to name everything, whether it's just A and B, big and small, or I
No.
guess the way I see it, I'm supportive of having a policy for naming when it's appropriate. Otherwise, internal staff, whether you want to call it east and west or big and
Correct.
small. We don't need to get in that business. I mean, internally, and that's how you refer to it. You put it on the website and deal with the public that way. But I
Correct.
understand if there's a second park or a second amenity, then having a policy spelled out. So
And essentially, that's what brought this on, was the addition of the shelter, that we knew we were gonna have to differentiate between the two. And then again with the Banner Farm. So yeah, I don't think we're gonna go out and say, all right, that little grassy space right there is this little grassy space. Now again, with this policy, that doesn't mean if somebody had a really good reason that said, well, that back walking trail should be the whatever walking trail, we would, per this policy, we could take it into consideration, but ultimately that would be up to town council and whether they wanted to name that or not. But no, we're not gonna go and say, okay, the tennis courts are named this and that's named that. It would, from the staff point of view, it would only be used when it was necessary for us. So again, in these particular situations, we would like to differentiate when somebody calls to reserve the shelter, we would like to say, well, would you like A shelter or B shelter? That way we just have that way to differentiate with the public of which shelter is which. And then again, as we decide to move forward on that Banner Farm property, just thinking about, again, those names stick. So everybody calls it the Banner, what are you doing on that Banner Farm property or Banner Farm Park? Is that the name we want? So I think being proactive about it now, early in the process, to make sure we get a name that we're comfortable with and want to keep. But no, I wouldn't foresee, again, every multi-purpose field. I mean, internally, we've called them 1, 2, and 3. That's not as much of a issue. Whereas I think picnic shelters, they may not know which one and for us to have a sign and to differentiate.
So this is about policy, but you're not gonna go and suggest we hang big signs everywhere
No,
after they're named or.
no,
actually get named.
I would, particularly with the shelters, have something that would fit within the scheme of the park. You know, we're not gonna have a billboard that says this is the a shelter, but you know, something that would fit in that we could probably tack to a post or a
Yeah.
board that says, you know, maple, like if we decide it's trees, that it'd say maple shelter and the other one would say, and sycamore, just as an example.
Mhm.
But something tasteful, but no, we wouldn't, again, tack a sign on everything that says that.
Any more questions, discussion?
But as I read the draft policy, anybody that approaches a town with a desire to name a facility or an amenity, you're compelled to bring it to that appropriate committee. Is
I
that
would,
correct?
if they meet the criteria, so I think that's where it goes to staff level first of, you know, if they just say, well, I want to name the tennis courts, I can't even think of an example right now, but the shiny rock courts or something, and that wouldn't meet our criteria because it doesn't, and there's no purpose to it. So that would not get brought to council, but if somebody came to me and said, hey, so-and-so, you know, who played here for years and they want to do this and it meets, you know, whatever, then I would think it would be, but then it would ultimately be up to this council, go to the Parks Advisory Board and then the council for naming. So I don't foresee it happening regularly.
Okay, well, I just didn't want the
So-
staff to be inundated with all these.
No, I
questions you
don't
have to carry to the
foresee that.
committee, then
No,
ultimately
I
the
don't
ordinance
foresee
is
that
up to council.
being an issue. As I said, this is more of when we're creating new facilities. But again, I just want to, you know, I was thinking back to the, you know, the auditorium over at Hendersonville High School is what kind of said, well, we should be prepared if that does happen to make sure we have set reasons
Okay.
why we would name things.
I think I'm with Randy on the no names. I know that's maybe a little controversial, but I think you are eliminating problems down the road.
Potentially, for
You
sure.
know, I get it. Gotta respect our elders and I get all that, but maybe you're heading off something that could be a huge division. It seems like it's come up before. And, you know, that's the way I was looking at it, James, was that, you know, this is just stamping out a problem that might come up down the road for somebody else. So, that's the only reason I would say no names. But, so, it's just that.
You say name, you're talking about.
I'm talking
personal
about
names.
personal names,
Yeah.
naming after someone.
That makes sense. But we would possibly come back and look at if we got a corporate or personal donation for sponsorship of a field or something
I
like
would,
that.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay. Put everybody on the same page here, what we're trying to accomplish.
But when you say names, do you mean like family names?
Yes.
Not just individual, okay.
Yeah, like trees,
Mhm.
you know, whatever, I don't see a problem with it, is that just them personal names that get attached to something, somebody go digging and
Yeah.
frame something, it's just a mess to fix.
Yeah.
Try to avoid. Okay. So with that being said, somebody make us a motion, if so desired, to put this in place, policy in place.
I'll move that we adopt the facility naming policy as presented.
Do we need to,
If you would like to remove the individual, yeah, I would make it with the removal of the policy allowing individual or family names, and then we can make that adjustment. If-
I'll stipulate that that would not be part of my motion. I think in the cases where an individual or a family would want to financially underwrite a facility that should be an option on the table. So I would-
Okay.
that's my motion is
All right.
as presented.
Okay. Look for a second for his motion.
I'll second that motion.
All right, any discussion?
So that's not just for, that's for as written.
As written, yeah.
And my thinking is that it ultimately has to have council approval and future councils, they can take it under advisement, whether it's a financial donation or it's recognizing somebody of the community, but if it's appropriate to name it after an individual, so be it. I don't want to tie their hands. I think it ought to be an option, but hopefully, I mean, I'm in Randy's camp where I'm not a proponent of it. I just hate to see it taken off the table entirely in the policy that, it's out there, but future councils and this council can make a decision on case by case basis.
Discussion for a vote. I'm gonna close in a second.
So really, we could do this for going forward, but we sort of, everybody sort of knows how we plan.
I guess you could say that.
All right.
As far as okay, all in favor?
All right,
I come on. Maybe,
I'm not.
he's not, okay. All right. Can we go ahead and do the staff updates before we go to the closing?
Yes, please.
Deputy Clerk.
Reminder that we have a vacancy on the Parks Committee. Applications are gonna be sent out to all the next couple of weeks. To be considered at your September 22nd meeting. We have advertised on the Facebook page and the website. So we'll send them, she left out to look at ahead of time. And also a reminder that the volunteer dinner is October 18th. Please.
Can you help me, October 18th, what night that's on or evening? All right, tax collector.
So as of August 31st, we've collected $257,663.43. Thank you to all the people in Millsboro. Get their bills, turn around, and write a check and send it in. We went from no payments to processing between 80 and 100 checks a day. First week, it was really quite amazing. So the collection percentage is 9%. The collection percentage last year at the end of August was 5.8%. It looks like a huge improvement, but it was actually that last year was really, really slow at the beginning of the collection year. We've taken in about $100,000 in the last 8 days. So, I'm pretty happy.
Good deal. Okay, Parks and Rec.
Few real quick updates, if you haven't stopped by town hall yet, our new recreation program, coordinator started middle of last week. Her name is Patricia. So she had a lot of great experience, doing small town community programming, in Texas, which is bring benefit to us, that we're really excited about. We already we got her, and we got confirmation, she got confirmation from Santa, that Santa is coming again this year for the Mills River Santa tour, so mark the calendar, December 10th. And we're also working on a little something for Halloween and we get some things done. We'll keep you guys posted. Just quick update, picnic shelter, slowly, we got doors Wednesday, so wait on that metal roof. We should get that shortly. And then as you guys noticed, we came in, I like the parking, soccer and tennis and all that other fun stuff that the kids have been, in school all day, want to get up and park and run. It's been very busy, which is great when people outside in the state. So we got soccer started, We got tennis lessons, we just started our second round, started this summer, we had 81 registrants this summer, which is great. And it's pretty neat, and good.
I mean, we heard about Santa Claus, what about Miss Claus?
This is all this.
We're gonna have elves again?
Yeah.
Good. Good, good. Okay. Well, y'all laughing at, I don't even think y'all saying last night.
That's all pretty.
Huh? Just busy. The zoning administrator.
Just a brief update. At council's request earlier this year, council directed staff to have conversations with the planning board about density limitations in town, density bonuses for affordable housing, and a couple other related topics. We had some of those continued conversations at the meeting on Tuesday, considering density and also looking at setback requirements. So I just wanted to inform you that those conversations are ongoing. Staff's doing research for them. I think the next item we're going to tackle is looking at the affordable or workforce housing density bonuses and looking at other comparable programs in the area. So just letting you know that's still ongoing, and we're working on that. That's all I have.
Town manager.
I would like to mention, yesterday I sent an email to the board about the ARPA workshops, and there's no action required at this point. I really just wanted to get it out there and get it in front of you. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. If you would like to schedule an individual workshop, we would need to advertise that, but that can happen at a later date. Otherwise, we plan to start putting the word out towards the end of this month, at your next meeting in September, later this month rather. We'll have some more materials to push out to the public. Any questions about that so far? Okay. And then I will also mention that we hired Kathy Johnson as our part-time administrative assistant. She has over a decade of experience in the tax office, so she's come well prepared for the position, and she's worked the last week and has done very well. So we're pleased to have her. We are still looking for a planning technician, so if you know anyone looking for a great opportunity, send them our way. And then I'll just remind council we have a closed session. That's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, if someone would, do we want to do any council comments before we get into this? Closed session, please, property?
I wanted to ask one question. The walking path around the back down there. What is anything currently going on down there? Any building or anything?
At the rear walking trail?
Yeah,
No.
would it be feasible that we might could get it mowed?
The field itself.
Yeah.
So we, as part of our master plan, we've been mowing as we can that front section. So the master plan calls for, the master plan calls for that front section that will be maintained open space. So right now we only have a bush hog. So we've been about once a month trying to keep that bush hog till we can get that work done. The rear section is what you all approved this year to become a wildflower meadow. So we are in the planning process for that. We are hoping it'll probably be this winter where it'll get sprayed, but the recommendation right now from the people we're working with is that we would not mow it to make it more suitable for future wildflower growth. So I know it's not the best looking, but it is going to be a process as we turn that over into wildflower meadow. But
I was just thinking about visibility of people going along the backside of the track for a safety factor. Cause it's getting big. So I didn't know. I just wanted to thank you.
Any other council comments?
Well, I'll echo some of Sandra's comments that I've noticed, because it doesn't take long, there's sycamores. Volunteers already coming out there, so you have to mow things at least about once, if not twice a year, just to prevent tree growth. Otherwise, you end up having to have mechanical removal of things like trees. So I didn't know, well, as just one member of this council, I'd be welcome to entertaining, purchasing more appropriate equipment to maintain it, so that we can mow it more often to prevent tree growth. So I don't think that's really part of the plan. Additionally, because land is at a premium here and everywhere, that's some of the most, that's the cheapest land that we can find right now. If we would just keep it from overgrowing and tree growth and what volunteers in there, woody growth. And if we need an acre or 2 acres for seasonal athletic field, if it's appropriate. So if we could just at least bush hog it twice a year, 3 times a year, and then mow it weekly, if there's like I said, a half acre that could be used as a practice field, when it's not too wet, but that's the cheapest land this town will find. So, if I'll kick it back to staff and to the Parks and Rec Committee, but, I would feel better if, as a town, we were doing more to enhance that property, to make open space, whether it's passive recreation or, like I said, more options we see is we've got a demand out here, and I think we can meet some of it rather than looking to Banner Farm Road or other places for additional recreational opportunities that I think we have 20 acres down there that we really could make better use of. And if it's tools that we're missing, then I certainly would like to empower the staff to make more of it available for recreational purposes, wherever that might be. So I just want to put that out there since you brought it up.
So what I'm hearing is you're willing, if we need additional equipment or whatever, and as long as staff feels like they got time appropriate to do it, if not, possibly even subcontracting the bush hogging or whatever to get done.
Right, and because I can see the days of having a farmer in there cutting it for hay have sort of passed. I mean, there's just too much activity. There's too much, liability involved with having that equipment in there. But, if it's having a 12 or 14 foot wide bush hog and a, 60, 80 horsepower tractor, that's an asset for this town. Then I think while that might cost the town $100,000 in the end, plus a carport to put it under, that's still cheaper than going out and buying land to level up and make a playing field out of, or a practice field, or just place to throw a frisbee or fly a kite. And as Sandra said, it's a safety issue right now. And then I have concerns about their 6 and 7 foot tall sycamores growing up out there. They can still be bush hogged down, but another year, got there was something more robust than a mower to cut them down. And I think, I just don't want to be short sighted. If we can utilize a portion of it or all of it, I think we need to, I just want to put that out there that at least as one member of this council, I'm supportive of if it takes more equipment so that we don't have town staff out there for hours on end, that they can mow it twice a year in 4 or 5 hours each time, if that's what it takes. And I think that would be great. And then if a portion of it can be then come behind it with, 0-turn mowers and maintain it for a midget or mite practice field for football, or like I said, just keep an area, a place to throw frisbees or fly kites or things of that nature. I'd see a need, or not a need, but an opportunity, especially with restroom facilities migrating that direction with the construction of this new picnic shelter, that I see as a missed opportunity that we're not using it. And if the hurdle is just we can't maintain it because we only have a 4 or 5 foot wide mower bush hog, then don't let that be the hindrance. I would like to see this council, give the resources to the park staff that they need to further utilize it.
So is everybody on board with having staff get together and see if anybody's comfortable with using bigger tractors, bigger bush hogs, and getting some prices on that equipment if so needed, and then see if what the conflict would be with it in the wildflower meadow if we stay in that route? Because we was going to put that where it wasn't really appropriate for any kind of play or activity, correct?
Right, so the master plan, and don't have the copy, so that front section is going to be maintained open space.
Right.
Essentially, it will be mowed grass that, why probably not, you wouldn't be game space, but certainly somebody could go out there, kick some soccer balls, fly kites, throw footballs, that sort of thing. That is the purpose of that front section. As it stands right now, even with equipment, that space, because it's been farmed for years, you guys know what land that looks like that's been farmed for years, work would need to be done to get it where it was
Mowable.
safe and mowable to be able to play. So there's that first hurdle. We have been working through, we've been trying to find a cost-effective way to do it. Because we're not agriculture, you'd think, oh, just plow it under, smooth it out, plant some new seed and then be good. But because we're not exempt, because due to agriculture, that kicks in the whole permitting process and engineering. And we already have this great flat space, so we have been trying to brainstorm some ways or find somebody to help us to basically help slowly fill in the grooves. So that way we're not having to basically tear everything up, start from scratch, but to slowly build it up till we do have would be an acceptable playing surface, running surface, that sort of thing. I have not found that person yet, but it is something staff has been working on to how to get that front section to be maintainable. As for that back section, so we do currently bush hog it about twice a year. And so once the growing season stops, it will get bush hogged again. Just after, so probably around November is when we would look at bush hogging that space. So, but if it wants, obviously it's the pleasure of the
Well, I thought
council.
that
so-
back space was what's gonna be turned into the managed meadow.
It
So
is
that's why we didn't bush hog it, because we're gonna
early
apply
on,
herbicide
yes,
to it and plant it
correct.
correctly.
Yes, so that all, I had a meeting just this week with Brian Tompkins, with,
And that's,
yeah, and that's definitely a, concern. We want to make sure it's going to be able to be cut down when we do it. And I don't think we're to where we can't do it yet, but yes, we have a whole plan, and I can certainly come back to you and bring Brian Tompkins back, he's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who's been helping us manage this project to kind of explain that process. But ultimately, the managed meadow, because of the time of grass growing season and all that, we'd be looking at next fall before the project's complete. And in reality, it'll take probably a few seasons to truly establish. So yeah, again, all things that I definitely know your concerns. If you want to make a priority that we mow that sooner than the end of grass mowing season, we certainly can, may have to pay them a little overtime, but we can get it done. Or contract.
Hire it
it,
out.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, I would get a quote on it. I'll
Okay.
just get a quote from somebody. And let's try to go ahead and get Brian on an agenda sometime between
Okay.
now and Thanksgiving.
Okay.
To let him get us all up to speed on what our timeline looks like from his eyes, and so we know, we can tell people. So good.
Is Mr. David Schaefer still on our Ag Advisory Committee?
I mean, I would think,
Yes.
I would think he would be probably use some of his resources when it comes time to fix.
Well, if nothing else, we
I-
can
yeah,
get technical direction from Supersod, because you'll cross the river and they have hundreds of acres that look like a pool table.
Yeah, and I have actually had him out here and we've done multiple tours. He was kind of in the same boat though, because where they, as agriculture, can clear their land, smooth it out, reseed, that's just what gets us in that little bit of a pickle, because we are not exempt, so we can't just plow under, smooth it out, and we don't meet those that ag exemption that they do. So he has come out here, he has looked at it. He is working to see if he could come up with some resources for me, but again, we've not figured that out yet. I mean, ultimately, we can go through the whole permitting and engineering process to do that, but when you already have grass and it's an open field, we're just trying to find the most cost-effective way to do that. So as I said, happy to take if you know of anybody that might be a good resource for me. But I've talked to lots of folks, and so far I've come up empty-handed. But
I'm just gonna throw this out there. So. What if? What's the possibility of putting it back in an ag lease for one season? And get the repairs done? I don't know. I don't even know if it's a possibility. I mean, it's basically, I know we're a public entity, it might be something we could just let Schaefer and them use it for 1 year for
Yeah.
$1 or $50 and let them come in and make the improvements at our cost. And then we can move on possibly quicker.
We can certainly look at that option as a
I mean,
a
we
1
might
year
talk
lease.
to him about that. But I'm just saying, maybe that's an option. Might save a ton
We'll
of
look at it.
irrigation and a ton of money for what we're trying to do.
Right. We'll look into the leasing.
Okay.
and get in contact with Dave.
Sounds good. Anything else? Okay. All right. I need help on something. I talked to Lonnie about it. We've got some standing water on 280 in a couple spots.
Mhm.
I'm seeing some cars get twisted up in it. One is directly in front of the falling barn at Fulham's Dairy, on 280. It would be, if you're coming this way on 280, I guess you're northbound. Is that correct? Yeah, northbound, directly in front of their driveway. The second one is at pretty much straight across from Sweetwater Road, just across and this way just a little bit. And I think part of that problem is, and it's just where those tomato trucks come out of the road. I've heard so many times, they've got a gravel pad, that it's just cleaning up in between those big tires, and it's all got washed down there to the low spot. And it'll stand a full 2 lanes wide. And I did mention this to Lonnie at the last TAC meeting, but I noticed nothing's come of it, but I'm sure they got plenty on their plate, but it's a pretty good hazard. And then Monday, it's out of our jurisdiction, but I will mention it just for everybody who travels at 191, the left-hand lane going out Monday, it was probably 4 or 5 inches in water on the bridge.
Wow.
And people was hitting it and it was splashing plumb. It was awful,
Hmm.
but it was a bad rain.
I've talked to Daniel about that already, about calling the maintenance department.
Yeah, they need to
And he
dig out
mentioned
both ends
possibly
of that.
talking to Lonnie because Sunday before last, I was sitting down at, the Moto Cafe parking lot, and there was about 8 cars pulled over, and cars were coming down through there. The water was about 8 inches deep in the road, and it was shooting water over all the cars sitting in the parking lot. It was so deep. And it was like that all the way past the DOT office, down by the Dr. Norton's place there. The water coming across the road by Mills River Restaurant is a river going down through there where it's coming off behind Dr. Norton's son's place. 280 between there and by Ingles. It's on both sides of the road, the whole outer lanes on both sides. The water's extremely deep to where you will hydroplane. And where they cleaned the culverts out coming down 191 on the north end, the water's running good. I did get out there and route some water coming down the driveways into the ditches, and they're working. And where they cleaned those culverts out, that was a tremendous help. But there's still water. The shoulders of the roads need to be cut down because the water has nowhere to go. And if you hit the shoulder going out, that tall grass will grab you and you're gonna be spun right around.
A lot of that has to do with the snow plowing in the winter. If they let the blade get up to the edge, it flips that windrows, that row of grass and sod and dirt, and it builds a dam. And the water just kind of stands in there.
Right, but
Um,
it's countywide.
It is, and they're a little bit short of help and short of funds, but if maybe mention to them the next time we have a rain event, maybe one of their
Yeah.
supervisors could ride around just a little bit and flag some spots.
Mhm.
And I just hate to see somebody, because if it happens on 280, it could be a fatality. It's to be bad. All right, any more council comments? None? All right, we'll get somebody to make some motion going into closed session pursuant to property acquisition.
I'll make a motion. We go into closed session for property acquisition.
Thank you, Sandra. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor?
Ah.
And aye.
Work good.
Good. Hey. Daniel, who do we need to stay with us? Can we let Arlie go and just keep?
Patty.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike, talk to him, definitely.